We live in interesting times for the headlines. The death toll from a powerful earthquake that triggered massive landslides in northern Japan rose to 44. 7 people, including 2 British tourists, were wounded Sunday in Paris when attacked by a man armed with a knife and an iron bar. President Duterte said the invalidation of the amnesty granted to Senator Antonio Trillanes was recommended by Solicitor General Jose Calida. And the makeup of Sweden's government remains up in the air after both left-wing and center-right blocs failed to gain a majority as anti-immigrant far-right makes gains in the general election. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And now to the news. The death toll from a powerful earthquake that triggered massive landslides in northern Japan rose to 44 on Monday, with tens of thousands of police and troops still on the ground to support survivors. Now, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said no one was left on a missing list, which suggested the figure could be the final death toll. Around 40,000 police, firefighters, troops, and maritime safety officials were providing assistance, with more than 2,700 people still forced to stay in shelters after the killer quake struck the northern Japanese island of Hokkaido last week. The majority of the dead are from the small rural town of Atsuma, where a cluster of dwellings were wrecked when a hillside collapsed from the force of the 6.6 magnitude quake. It caused deep brown scars in the landscapes. Suga also warned that islanders should remain on alert as rainfall was forecast in the region, which could trigger fresh landslides. The quake was the latest in a string of natural disasters to batter the island nation. Western parts of the country are still recovering from the most powerful typhoon to strike Japan in a quarter of a century, which claimed 11 lives and shut down the main regional airport. Launching a campaign for another term as head of his ruling party, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe reiterated his government will, quote, do its best to restore the disasters-hit regions. The Philippine government is ready to assist evacuees following a weather report that a potential strong typhoon is threatening to enter the Philippine area of responsibility this week. According to the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical and Astronomical Services, or PAGASA, severe tropical storm Mongkut, international name, was spotted 2,745 kilometers east of southern Luzon and may enter the PAR on Wednesday.
Lahat naman po ng taong gobyerno na gumagalaw sa mga panahon ng aberya ay naghahanda na rin po para dito sa malaking bagyong ito. The DSWD is ready to provide humanitarian assistance. Meron na naman tayong strategiya talaga dyan. Matagal na pong naka-lay down o naka-lay out yung ating mga plano. Hindi na po tayo magdadala ng mga goods dun sa mga lugar na po pwedeng tamaan dahil meron ng mga naka-preposition na mga goods dyan. Siguro po ang sisiguruduhin na lang idadagdagan yung mga goods sa mga lugar na ine-expect nating dadaanan ng super typhoon. Siguro, starting kung susunod yung press briefing natin, imbitahin na rin natin ang iba't ibang ahensya.
Roque, meanwhile, urged Filipinos, especially those living near seas, to find temporary homes to stay this early to avoid overcrowding in evacuation or resettlement areas.
Hindi po natin mapipigilan ang mga aberya gaya ng mga super typhoon, pero mababawasan po natin ang danyos na dinudulot ng mga ganitong aberya sa pamamagitan ng pagiging handa. So, i-anticipate na po natin ang mga pwedeng mangyari para po wag na kayo manatili sa mga bahay-bahay ninyo. Yung mga gusto nyong iligtas, dalhin na po sa ibang mga lugar. At kung po pwede po, maghanda na rin, lalo na yung mga dadaan.
The Makati City Regional Trial Court Branch 150 deferred the issuance of an alias warrant of arrest and a whole departure order against Senator Antonio Trillanes and set the motion filed by the Department of Justice for hearing on September 14. In a 3-page order, Makati RTC Branch 150 Judge Elmo Alameda said he will not issue a warrant of arrest and a whole departure order against Trillanes for the meantime, since he needs to review the case. Alameda noted that acting on the motion of the prosecution without hearing Trillanes' side would be in violation of his constitutionally guaranteed right to due process. The Makati RTC is handling the rebellion case against Trillanes and several other Magdalo soldiers in connection with their involvement in the Manila Peninsula siege in 2007. It also noted the pending petition filed by Trillanes before the Supreme Court questioning the validity of the revocation of Proclamation number 75 issued by former President Aquino granting amnesty to the senator and his co-accused. But Senator Trillanes refuses to go out of the Senate.
Based on our engagements with the armed forces, that they still have a standing order to arrest me. Ang problema kasi doon sa statement niya, meron siyang deniability eh. Kaya nga binalidate natin doon sa ground, sa operating units. At meron pa rin eh. Ngayon, ang sa akin dito is probably is just trying to trick me into that trap. But I won't fall for that. And remember, ito si Duterte is notorious for lying to the public.
On Friday, the DOJ filed an urgent ex parte motion last week asking the trial court to issue an HDO and an alias warrant of arrest following the issuance by President Duterte of Proclamation number 572 declaring as void ab initio from the start the amnesty issued to Trillanes for his failure with the basic requirement of filing an application for an amnesty together with an admission of guilt. It argued that the rebellion case is still pending with the court as the prosecution has yet to present its evidence insofar as Trillanes is concerned. Trillanes' amnesty was granted to him in 2011 by then President Aquino.
Hindi man pwedeng si President Aquino yung magpoproseso niyan. Imagine ito yung absurdity ng kunyari 10,000 o 100,000 yung nagabail ng amnesty o 1 million. Na-imagine nyo ba yung presidenteng pipirma ng dokumento? Di ba? In fact, may mga presidential or mga executive orders nga na executive secretary lang pumipirma for as long as delegated siya.
Meanwhile, the senator also said that President Duterte was being paranoid when he spoke of a plot by the Liberal Party and communist rebels to oust him over the weekend.
Sabihin ko, kay address ko sa mga senior PMAers na nasa security o mga security officials ng ating bansa, si Chief of Staff, si SND, kung sino man, all right sir, wala akong nire-recruit, walang ouster plan. All right. Now, I don't expect them to take my word for it. They can validate it all they want, but babalik at babalik sila doon na ganun talaga ang totoo. Sa totoo lang, talagang nakakaperwisyo din itong situation na to sa akin. So, humingi nga ako ng dispensa kay Senate President Soto for the inconvenience and obstruction ng some Senate operations and personnel.
Meanwhile, President Duterte said the invalidation of the amnesty granted to Senator Trillanes was recommended by Solicitor General Jose Calida, who launched a process to review and dig into the amnesty records of some officials. Let's listen in.
Pag sinabi ng Solgen may mali and this has to be corrected, I cannot refuse. He is the government lawyer. I am not, though I am a mayor or mayor and president. I cannot insist, lalo na in view of the fact that it was already recorded as a public paper.
The president also argued that the amnesty paper of Trillanes was flawed from the start.
Yung sa application niya, TRO sa Supreme Court, nagbigay siya ng sample ng affidavit. Yan. Failure to comply, it must be in affidavit form and you narrate anong kasalanan mo. Ang problema, yung nag-imbestiga at nag-recommend ng amnesty, siya rin ang nag-approve ng amnesty.
The president also slammed Senator Trillanes when questioned what his critic has done with the military since amnesty was granted to him when he became a senator.
It was all Trillanes pretending to be a crusading soldier when as a matter of fact, wala naman silang ginawa. He not only abandoned the vision of the military, he became a corrupt guy, collecting dyan sa mga negosyante. Para siyang abogado. Alam namin yan, kasi ang negosyante, baski na paano mo taguin, nagsasabi talaga yan. Ang problema sa itong kay Trillanes is, he is also playing with the Communist Party of the Philippines. Pero alam ko na noon pa, gusto nila rin pumasok sa PMA na may mga kadete na hinihila nila para yung mga left. And always it is poverty. Eh bakit siya malaking bahay niya? Bakit iyon ipahat lang? Style na bugok.
Since the case is now in court, the president said he leaves everything to the court, especially on the senator's possible arrest.
Sabi niya na continuing arrest, well, let the court decide on it. Whether he should go back to jail because that is where he came from.
7 people, including 2 British tourists, were wounded in Paris when attacked by a man armed with a knife and an iron bar, according to police and other sources. 7 people, including 2 British tourists, were wounded in Paris late Sunday by a knife-wielding man, a terrifying attack that bystanders tried to stop by throwing petanque balls at the assailant. Now, police said 4 of the victims were in a critical condition after the man brandishing a large blade and an iron bar went on the rampage next to a canal in the northeast of the capital. The suspect is believed to be an Afghan national and has been arrested, according to a source close to the inquiry. The attack took place just before 2300 on the banks of a canal in Paris's 19th district. Eyewitness Youssef Najat, 28, said he was walking beside the canal when he saw a man running and holding a knife about 10 to 11 inches long. He said, quote, there were around 20 people chasing him and they started throwing petanque balls at him. He said around 4 or 5 balls hit him in the head, but they weren't able to stop him. Now, France has been on high alert following a string of jihadist attacks in recent years, often by people who have become radicalized or claim to have acted in the name of ISIS. More than 240 people have been killed by Islamist extremists since a massacre at the Charlie Hebdo satirical magazine in Paris in January 2015. Meanwhile, a serious incident took place in the northern English town of Barnsley, where a woman chased a man with a large knife, according to police and witnesses. The woman has been arrested and remains in custody, and the man is injured following the incident. Take a look.
was setting up my stall, and this woman was walking down. There was a man in front of her, and when they got to my stall, I got my back to them, and I thought they bumped into each other. And then when I turned round, this man run away, and the woman got a big knife out, about 12-inch, and run after him and chased him up Market Hill. She came back to get her bag. She picked her bag up, and all she was saying, waving a knife, kill, kill, kill.
6 people were killed and another 16 injured when a car bomb exploded outside a local government office in Mogadishu, according to Somali police and rescue workers. Take a look. The explosion leveled buildings and left a thick plume of smoke which could be seen across the city. The attack was claimed by the Shabab, an Al-Qaeda-aligned jihadist group fighting to overthrow the internationally backed government in Somalia. Active for the last decade, the militants carry out regular bombings and armed assaults on government, military, and civilian targets in the capital. The makeup of Sweden's government remains up in the air after both left-wing and center-right blocs failed to gain a majority as anti-immigrant far-right makes gains in the general election. Prime Minister Stefan Löfven invited the center-right opposition alliance to talks aimed at a cross-bloc cooperation. After his Social Democrats remained the biggest party with 28.4% of votes, its weakest election score in a century. He said the election result marked, quote, the death of a bloc politics in Sweden. Take a look.
Visst är jag besviken på det faktum att ett parti med rötterna i nazismen kan vinna så mycket mark i vår tid.
Yeah, they had very high expectations, but we are making Swedish history. We are raising every election. We are racing very strong. So I think we still should be very proud.
Nu är det väldigt många barn i vuxna.
To Japan now, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe defended his economic record and pledged a controversial reform of the country's post-war constitution as he launched his campaign for another term as head of his ruling LDP party. Abe is seen comfortably winning the September 20 vote against his sole challenger, former Defense Minister Shigeru Ishiba, which would put him on track to become Japan's longest-serving premier. A victory would effectively keep the hawkish Abe in power for another 3-year term at the helm of the world's third-largest economy. It's time to tackle constitutional reform, vowed Abe, adding that he aims to submit a reform bill to Parliament later this year. Article 9 of Japan's constitution, forged in the aftermath of World War II, forces the pacifist country to forever renounce war and stipulates that armed forces will never be maintained. Now, this creates a headache for Japan's self-defense forces, a well-equipped military stuck in a constitutional gray zone. Abe also vaunted the record of his Abenomics policy, which combines ultra-loose monetary policy with fiscal stimulus in a bid to pep up the former Asian economic powerhouse. On the diplomatic front, Abe reiterated he was determined to meet face-to-face with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to resolve the issue of kidnapping of Japanese citizens in the Cold War period by Pyongyang agents. His rival Ishiba has identified demographic concerns and the regional security threat from nuclear-armed North Korea as the 2 biggest challenges facing Japan. The biggest show on earth made an astonishing comeback as North Korea put on its all-singing, all-dancing propaganda display, the mass games, for the first time in 5 years. Take a look. Now, months in the preparation, the show featured tens of thousands of performers under the curved arches of the Mayday Stadium, enacting scenes from Korean history and modern life against an ever-changing and unique backdrop. It was made up of 17,490 children, turning the colored pages of books in sequence to create giant images rippling across one side of the stadium, an analog version on a giant scale of a usually digital solution. They portrayed scenes from floral landscapes to portraits of late leaders Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, interspersed with slogans including "We can win if we defend socialism" and "Our motherland is the strongest because of the Marshal," a reference to Kim Jong-un, the third generation of his family to rule the country. The crowd, the stadium is said to hold 150,000 people, erupted into cheers as Kim entered for the premiere of the new mass games, titled, quote, "The Glorious Country," and part of the celebrations for the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, as the North is officially known. Performers are largely school children and students, but range from child gymnasts to a 69-year-old player of the kayagum, a traditional Korean string instrument, accompanied by 1,200 others. Many scenes had well over 1,000 people on stage, and Guinness World Records lists a 2007 performance of the previous version of the mass games known as Arirang as the world's largest gymnastic display with 100,090 participants. Meanwhile, in keeping with the nuclear-armed North's efforts to minimize militaristic elements of the celebrations, it did not put ICBMs on show at a military parade earlier Sunday. The themes focused on development and prosperity, and even a Korean War section made no overt reference to the U.S. Thousands of North Korean troops marched through Pyongyang, followed by artillery and tanks, but not the long-range missiles that have been a bone of contention in its nuclear tensions with Washington. This is a big and positive statement from North Korea. Thank you to Chairman Kim. We will both prove everyone wrong, Trump tweeted, referring to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Now, in June, Kim and Trump signed a vague agreement to work towards denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, but it did not include a timeline, details, or mechanisms to verify the process. Now, some analysts had predicted that Kim would tone down the display after his summit with U.S. President Donald Trump. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK, as the North is officially known, was proclaimed on September 9, 1948, 3 years after Moscow and Washington divided the peninsula between them in the closing days of the Second World War. We'll go for a short break. Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned. President Trump's latest threat to impose tariffs on all Chinese imports sent Asian markets tumbling on growing fears of an all-out trade war between the world's top two economies. The president's comments added to the uncertainty on trading floors, which have also been hit by concerns of a brewing financial crisis in emerging markets. They also overshadowed data showing a bigger than forecast jump in U.S. jobs creation for August and sent all three main indexes on Wall Street into negative territory. There was some relief earlier Friday that Trump didn't immediately impose levies on $200 billion of Chinese goods after the passing of a deadline for a public consultation. The threatened tariffs would add to the $50 billion in imports already targeted and mark a major step up in the long-running battle between the world's top two economies. However, President Trump told reporters on Air Force One later that day this. Take a listen.
But we've taxed them $50 billion, that's on technology. Now we've added another $200 billion. And I hate to say this, but behind that, there's another $267 billion ready to go on short notice if I want.
Now, that would cover virtually all the goods the United States imports China. Beijing has threatened to retaliate against any measures out of Washington. Meanwhile, President Trump called for Apple to make its products in the U.S. instead of China to avoid suffering the consequences of this trade war with Beijing. President Trump has repeatedly called for companies to move production to the United States or to keep it there while pushing aggressive trade actions aimed at narrowing the U.S. trade deficit, which he equates with theft from Americans. Take a look. Apple prices may increase because of the massive tariffs we may be imposing on China. But there is an easy solution where there would be zero tax and indeed a tax incentive, Trump tweeted. Make your products in the United States instead of China. Start building new plants now. Exciting. But the higher cost of wages in the United States could offset the benefits Apple might gain by avoiding tariffs affecting its products manufactured in China. The Trump administration has placed punitive tariffs on $50 billion in Chinese goods and threatened to tax all Chinese imports to the U.S. U.S. businesses have become increasingly concerned about the tariffs, which are raising prices for manufacturers and could hurt the economy. But President Trump has been unapologetic, insisting that his tough tactics will work. Alibaba co-founder Jack Ma announced he would step down as head of the pioneering Chinese e-commerce giant in 1 year, a departure already drawing comparisons to the retirement of late Apple founder Steve Jobs. Analysts said the early withdrawal of 54-year-old Ma, the charismatic face of a company that has revolutionized how and what China's people consume, will challenge Alibaba to carry on Ma's vision amid rising competition. Take a look.
About IT. IT to DT is not the technology difference.
We want to enable the city that making.
So that's why actually we had a great idea and also help them to fulfill our dream. And
我经常讲说，不要把波音747的引擎装在拖拉机里面。
And we'll go for another break. The news continues here on Eagle News International. Welcome back. Tens of thousands of people across the globe took to the streets demanding that government step up action on global warming, even as UN climate talks tasked with breathing life into the Paris Agreement faltered. Nearly 1,000 events in more than 90 countries delivered a two-pronged message: usher in a world powered by renewable energy rather than planet-warming gas, oil, and coal, and protect the people most vulnerable to rising seas and climate-enhanced extreme weather. In Bangkok, Thai fishermen and laborers whose livelihoods are threatened by rising sea levels kicked off on International Day of Protests in Bangkok.
We have a lot of people around the world. We have youth, we have women, we have many diversity, because we can see that if climate change happens, it not happen only in specific place, but it happen and it affects all over the world, all over every country. We want climate change fund. The reason that we want this fund is that we can see that many countries, for example, many developed countries or many capitalists, many investors, they also cause a lot of climate change. They stimulate the global warming, but sometimes they just don't have to pay anything. They just like nothing happen because they are rich and they have power. So we want them to pay the tax for global warming.
The rolling 24-hour event peaked in San Francisco, where an estimated thousands snaked through the city, chanting and carrying handmade signs and banners. Several slogans were barbs from the heart of Blue America pointed at Washington. Alternative energy, not alternative facts, read one. California, by some estimates, the fifth largest economy in the world, has committed ambitious goals for slashing carbon dioxide emissions over the next 3 decades. Governor Jerry Brown leads a coalition of subnational regions and cities also taking aggressive climate action. Many will be represented next week in the port city at the Global Climate Action Summit. But within his own state, Brown has come under attack for allowing natural gas and oil extraction under his watch. Now, hours earlier in France, up to 115,000 people turned out in what may be the country's largest environmental demonstration.
Surtout nous autres, les Méditerranéens, on est au cœur d'un drame écologique qui est la plastification de la mer Méditerranée. Hein, on dit qu'au rythme où on va, en 2050, il y aura plus de plastique que de poissons dans la mer. Donc c'est pas des petits sujets, je veux dire, c'est pas quelque chose qui serait dans la nuance idéologique ou même dans la pure confrontation idéologique. L'enjeu, c'est de savoir si ce qui doit dominer le monde, c'est chacun pour soi ou tous ensemble.
Over 10,000 people turned out in the Danish capital Copenhagen, while 1,300 rallied in front of the European Parliament in Brussels. A climate summit opens next week in San Francisco after California's governor proposed the event in the wake of President Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. In 2015, agreement was created with a target of keeping global temperatures from rising another degree Celsius between now and 2100. Achieving the Paris target set out in 2015 means the world would have to stop emitting greenhouse gases altogether in the next half-century, according to scientists. The issue of how to fight or how the fight against climate change will be funded and how it should be made available to developing nations are key sticking points in the Bangkok talks. Even as global warming outpaces efforts to curb it, sharp divisions between rich and developing countries, especially over money, have deadlocked the critical UN talks, which aim to hammer out a draft rule book that ministers and heads of state can push across the finish line at a UN climate summit in December. Hurricane Florence is expected to become a dangerous major hurricane by late Monday U.S. time as it headed towards the U.S. East Coast. This is according to the National Hurricane Center. States of emergency were declared in preparation for the storm. The center of Florence was located about 685 miles southeast of Bermuda, according to the NHC in its 0300 GMT Monday advisory. Florence had maximum sustained winds of 90 miles per hour, making it a Category 1 storm on the 5-level Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale. Now, the NHC warned that Florence is, quote, forecast to rapidly strengthen to a major hurricane by Monday night and is expected to remain an extremely dangerous major hurricane through Thursday.
It is spinning much faster than it was yesterday. And all estimates are that it'll be spinning even faster by the time it gets to the East Coast, which apparently it is going to do, is get to the East Coast. And when it gets here, it's estimated, it may be, this is an estimate, a Category 4 hurricane, which is between 130 and 156 miles an hour. Is that whatever happens, we're going to have a lot of rain and a lot of wind. Even if the hurricane goes farther north than is anticipated in this graphic, we're still going to have a lot of water and a lot of wind. So what that means is we need to be prepared. As I mentioned yesterday, the official side of preparations is being done in a magnificent fashion. We've had practice doing this, as you know, in recent years, and Team South Carolina is on the job. People are being activated. I issued the executive order yesterday that allowed a lot of things to happen and to happen more quickly. And we're moving assets and people to the coast, getting people in place to respond to whatever happens.
A strong 6.9 magnitude earthquake struck New Zealand's remote Kermadec Islands on Wednesday, but authorities said there was no tsunami threat. The quake struck at 4:19 p.m. at a depth of 111 kilometers, with its epicenter 770 kilometers northeast of Auckland, according to the USGS. The Hawaii-based Pacific Tsunami Warning Center said there's no tsunami threat from this quake. The uninhabited Kermadecs are New Zealand's northernmost islands, and they are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, a hotbed of volcanic and earthquake activity at the intersection of several tectonic plates. Meanwhile, the ocean cleanup readies to launch its first system inside the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. The system is a giant U-shaped barrier that will float in the ocean with the aim of trapping the plastic and debris that floats into it. Take a look. Eagle News International will be right back.
Appropriate ratings sa lahat ng TV shows. Para ugaliin ng pamilya ang responsableng panonood. Teamwork tayo, parents!
Rated G, good for all. Oops, rated PG.
Dapat may mga magulang para sagutin ang mga tanong ng kabataan.
Grabe, rated SPG, maselan!
Higpitan ang paggabay.
Pag rated MTRCB, rated responsable.
Landmarks, Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
Federalismo. Ang federalismo ay isang sistema ng gobyerno kung saan ang mga miyembrong nasasakupan ay nakapaloob sa isang kasunduan na pamumunuan ng mga gobernador ang mga estado o probinsya sa isang bansa. Sa sistemang ito ay nabibigyan ng kapangyarihan ng isang estado na maging malaya at makapagdesisyon sa sariling nasasakupan. Dahil dito, ang mga estado ay maaaring magpatupad ng kanilang sariling mga batas.
In tennis, Japan on Sunday hailed Naomi Osaka's stunning upset against the legendary Serena Williams to win the US Open, giving the disaster-hit nation some rare good news after a summer of deadly natural disasters. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe led the congratulations, taking to Twitter to congratulate Osaka after her 6-2, 6-4 win in New York. Abe was on his way to the northern island of Hokkaido, where a massive earthquake last week sparked landslide that buried houses in rural towns, killing at least 35 people and injuring hundreds of others. Kei Nishikori, who also had a good US Open, losing in the quarterfinals to Novak Djokovic, flooded Twitter with emojis of trophies, thumbs up, and Japanese flags. This was followed by a simple tweet of proud alongside a Japanese flag. Public broadcaster NHK took a break from its round-the-clock coverage of the disaster to turn the happier news. The Asahi Shimbun Daily said on Twitter it would be printing an extra edition and distributing it in Tokyo. The final will probably be remembered for a meltdown from Williams, who called the chair umpire as a thief, as much for the 20-year-old's historic win. Williams' tantrum overshadowed an outstanding performance from Osaka, who made her second career title a Grand Slam after winning her first at Indian Wells in March. Osaka has dual Japanese-American citizenship and often replies to questions from Japan's media in English, apologizing for not knowing the appropriate word when she speaks Japanese. But Japanese fans on social media were happy to claim her as one of their own on the day of her greatest triumph. Meanwhile, in men's division, Novak Djokovic clinched his third US Open title on Sunday with a 6-3, 7-6, 6-3 win over Juan Martín del Potro, taking him level with Pete Sampras' mark of 14 Grand Slams. Djokovic, playing in his 8th final in New York and already the champion in 2011 and 2015, is now just 3 slams behind Rafael Nadal and 6 back from the record 20 held by Roger Federer. It was also the third time when the 31-year-old Serb had completed the Wimbledon US Open double. For world number 3 Del Potro, it was a heartbreaking experience coming in just his second slam final 9 years after he was crowned US Open champion. And sprint legend Usain Bolt's football training has been put on hold after he flew out of Australia for a previously planned commitment, his league clubs had said. The Jamaican superstar is pursuing his long-held dream of playing professional football and arrived in Gosford, 75 kilometers of North Sydney last month for training with the Central Coast Mariners. The 32-year-old has been with the A-League side for 3 weeks and in late August made a 20-minute cameo for the club in a preseason game. The team did not say where Bolt was traveling to, but Sydney's Daily Telegraph reported that he was going to France for an event. Bolt's arrival has generated excitement on the Central Coast, with some 10,000 people packing the local stadium for his football debut. The world's fastest man has struggled with his fitness since arriving, but said last month that he hoped to be ready to go by the start of the A-League season in mid-October. And these are the stories for EN Sports. I'm Ben Bernaldez, and I am 1 with 25.
Meanwhile, people on the streets of Tokyo reacted to Naomi Osaka's stunning upset against the legendary Serena Williams to win the US Open, giving the nation some rare good news after a summer of deadly natural disasters. The final will probably be remembered for a meltdown from Serena Williams, who called the chair umpire a thief, as much as for the 20-year-old's historic win. Serena Williams has been fined $17,000 by the U.S. Tennis Association in the wake of her outburst during the controversial U.S. Open final loss to Japan.
オリンピックぜひ出てもらって日本人として活躍してほしいなと思います。
すごかったね。やっぱりなかなかね、世界一なんかにテニスになれないからね。初めてだもんね。
And finally in our news, enjoy espressos and snacks all while playing with cats that are available for adoption. Krista Venistapok reports from Houston.
Are you someone who loves coffee? How about cats? Well, El Gato Coffee House is a place for you. El Gato is a cafe and adoption center partnered with Friends for Life, whose mission is to provide a comfortable environment for adoptable cats until they find their forever home. If you are not looking to adopt, guests can enjoy cat therapy, which also helps socialize the cats. Some activities include yoga with cats, Saturday morning cartoons, Meowvie night, and kitty crafts. Students are also encouraged to do work or to study here while getting moral support from these cute and lovable felines. Their coffee selection is also something to try, with drinks such as lavender mojito and milk kitty.
A friend of mine, she's a kennel worker, she's mentioned this place and I was like, dude, perfect, a cat cafe, yeah. So I just started working here and I basically watch them if there's anything weird going on with their health or anything like that. If you're looking to adopt, this is a great place to come. You can sit around with them, get to know them, and get them to know you. All these cats, because they come from shelter settings, it's hard to get that personal one-on-one attention in a shelter whenever you can come in here and just sit with them. And they do come from a no-kill shelter, so everybody is, I mean, you're kind of being able to help that whole no-kill shelter side, and we're like the middleman, pretty much.
Reporting from Houston, Texas, I'm Krista Venice, your EBC correspondent, and we are 1 with 25.
Thank you, Krista, and that's it for tonight's broadcast of Alma Angeles, always 1 with 25.